Up until now, our web pages have just been strings of text, headers and paragraphs, although marked up some for emphasis here and there. But if you think about your audience, you probably want to provide some structure to your web pages to make them visually appealing and easy to navigate from page to page. In this video, we introduce some concepts and techniques for organizing your pages. We begin by introducing the concepts of visual formatting, the block model, which includes content, padding, borders, and margins, and the properties used to describe these characteristics. Over 35 properties. These are your tools. We end the video with multiple examples of implementing a page layouts, how to use these tools. We have a website with multiple pages. You need to pay attention to the appearance of your pages and to how your readers will navigate among pages. Your readers will comprehend your site much better if you organize each page with a similar structure, or at least have a few fundamental structures such that every page fits into one of them. So instead of something like this, which looks sort of like a word salad, you have a general structure. Here's a common page layout that we'll work with in this session. Across the top, the logo or title area. Along the side, what I call sidebar, and then the main body area, and then at the bottom, your copyright or notice area. So this page has 4 boxes to its structure: title box, sidebar box, main body box, and copyright box. So they each have a well-defined purpose. For a more concrete example, we might end up with something like this page. Again, along the top is your title, along the left-hand side is your sidebar, and in the main part is your body, and at the very bottom is your copyright. So that's kind of the goal we're setting. So, how do we build this? In the web visual model, everything is organized into boxes and containing blocks. All of these are rectangles. Curves and angles come later and are discussed in the advanced course. In rendering your HTML content into the canvas, your browser recognizes block boxes, inline boxes, and table boxes. We look at the first 2 here. Table boxes are examined in a later lesson. Now, the visual elements we've examined so far work this way. These elements generate block boxes: body, P, H1 through H6, pre, HR, and div. While these elements generate inline boxes: A, B, I, mark, S, span, sub, sup, and U. To get an idea of how these boxes are created, you can expose the box by specifying a background color. In the head element, have this style element. Give it a name .mystery and give it background color pink. And in the body, P, class equals mystery. Here I want to visualize a block box. And the next paragraph, B, class equals mystery, looking at an inline box to show its shape and size. And then you show that up in your browser and you'll see the block box extends the width of the screen, and the inline box takes just the text included in the inline. So, for display purposes, the dual starting points for us are these. First, the viewport. That's the screen area where your page is displayed in your browser. Could be full screen, could be a tab. It varies. And second, the canvas. That's the area where your page is rendered. Now, the user can resize the viewport, and your browser may respond by reorganizing the layout on the canvas. Each box is composed of its content, possibly some padding, and maybe a border. You can also specify margins, space you want to have between blocks. It's like hanging framed artworks. The art itself corresponds to a block's content. There is often a mat around the art to help set it off. This corresponds to the padding for a web block. Then the art often has a frame, and this corresponds to the border of a web block. The idea of margins is analogous to how much space do you want between paintings when you hang them on a wall, and how much space between paintings and the edge of the wall, and the ceiling and the floor. So, how much space do you want between blocks when you lay them out on a page, and how much space from the edges of the page? As you might imagine, these concepts are implemented using style properties. Let's look at block-related properties. The display property indicates what kind of block the element generates, especially if you want to override the default. Display, inline or block or none or inherent. And there's others, but they're not relevant here. Position, where do you want the block? What kind of positioning should you use? And the choices are static, relative, absolute, fixed, and inherent. A static box is the normal flow of layout, and we'll look at that shortly. A relative box is offset relative to what would be its normal flow position. Some or all of top, right, bottom, or left indicate the relative amount. An absolute box has its position specified by some or all of top, right, bottom, or left, totally taken out of the normal flow position. And a fixed box is absolute plus it's not scrollable. The above distinction should become clearer when we get to our examples at the end. The float property is how you get boxes to line up to the right or the left, creating the column effect. So you can say float, none, or left or right or inherent. The standard flow of displaying boxes is as follows. By default, a box is as wide as its containing block, adjusted by any padding or border. The height of a box is calculated by the browser based on the amount of space needed to hold the content. The size style properties, width and height, defined shortly, can change the size of blocks. The initial containing block is created by the body element. Nesting block box elements such as P within div is what creates deeper levels of containing blocks. Consecutive boxes are stacked vertically, going down the canvas, placed so that each box's left edge is adjacent to the left edge of its containing block, adjusted by any padding, border, or margin. A float of left generates a block box such that the left edge of the box is adjacent to the left edge of its containing box, adjusted by any padding, border, or margin. And if there's room, other content can begin on the right. A float of right generates a block box such that the right edge of the box is adjacent to the right edge of its containing box, adjusted by any padding, border, or margin. And if there's room, other content can begin on the left. Usually, for this to be useful, you need to set the width of these boxes less than 100%. A related property is clear, which can force a floated box to be placed down on the page. Clear, none, or left, or right, or both are inherent. A clear of left requires the box's top edge to be below the bottom edge of any previous left floating boxes, so stack these boxes on the left. A clear of right requires the box's top edge to be below the bottom edge of any previous right floating boxes, so stack these boxes on the right. A clear of both requires the box's top edge be below the bottom edge of any previous left floating boxes and right floating boxes, so start fresh below any existing boxes. And a clear of none, the default, says there are no constraints on the box regarding floats. All the following property values are specified as length type values or percentage values relative to containing blocks. Location-related properties. Top, specify length or a percentage or auto or inherit. Right, bottom, and left all have the same possible values. Auto means calculate based on the context. Size-related properties. For width, you can specify length or percentage or auto or inherit. For min width, though, just length and percentage and inherit. And for max width, length or percentage or none or inherit. For height, you can specify a length value, percentage, or auto or inherit. But min height only has length or percentage or inherit. And max height has length, percentage, or none or inherit. So there is no maximum to the width and height. These width and height properties do not apply to inline boxes. Padding-related properties. Padding is space between the content and the inside of its border. You can specify padding on each side, or you can use a shorthand. You can say padding top, padding right, or padding bottom, or padding left, and in each case specify a length or percentage or inherit. Or you can just say padding and specify 1, 2, 3, or 4 values, or inherit. If one value is specified, it's applied to all 4 sides. If 2 values are specified, the top and the bottom are set to the first, and the left and the right are set to the second. If 3 values are specified, the top is set to the first value, the sides are set to the second value, and the bottom is set to the third value. If 4 values are specified, they are set to the top, right, bottom, and left, respectively. Border-related properties. A border is a line or frame drawn around the content. The properties are border top color, border right color, border bottom color, and border left color. Each of those can have a color value or the word transparent or inherit. Or you can use the shorthand border color, which has 1 to 4 values or inherit. If 1 value is specified, it is applied to all 4 sides. If 2 values are specified, the top and bottom are set to the first, and the left and right are set to the second. If 3 values are specified, the top is set to the first value, the sides are set to the second value, and the bottom is set to the third value. If 4 values are specified, they are set to the top, right, bottom, and left, respectively. Then there's also border top style, border right style, border bottom style, and border left style. And the styles could be none, or solid, or double, or dashed, or dotted, or groove, or inherit, or ridge, or inset, or outset. And again, the border style can have 1 to 4 values, or inherit, and the values chosen from that list. And as before, if 1 value is specified, it is applied to all 4 sides. If 2 values are specified, the top and bottom are set to the first, and the left and right are set to the second. If 3 values are specified, the top is set to the first value, the sides are set to the second value, and the bottom is set to the third value. And if 4 values are specified, they are set to the top, right, bottom, and left, respectively. Also, you can specify the width of the border. Border top width, border right width, border bottom width, border left width. And you can say thin, medium, thick, or have an actual length value or inherit. Or you can use the shorthand border width, which has 1 or 4 values or the word inherit. As before, if 1 value is specified, it applies to all 4 sides. If 2 values are specified, the top and bottom are set to the first, and the left and right are set to the second. If 3 values are specified, the top is set to the first value, the sides are set to the second value, and the bottom is set to the third value. If 4 values are specified, they are set to the top, right, bottom, and left, respectively. There is a shorthand to specify width, style, and color for each side of a border. Border top, border right, border bottom, and border left. and you can include a width value, a color value, and a style value, or inherit, for each one of these. Or you can take the ultimate shorthand, just say border, and that you specify a width, a color, a style in any order. Unlike the other border properties, you cannot use this abbreviated form to specify different values for each side. For example, border red groove 6 pixels is the same as border 6 pixels red groove. Any omitted values inherit from the context. This sets these values for all 4 edges of the border. This is how I usually code border info. Margin-related properties. A margin indicates how much clearance is desired around a block. You can specify margin top, margin right, margin bottom, and margin left. And the possible values are a length, or a percentage, or inherit. Or, of course, you can use the margin shorthand, 1 to 4 values, or inherit. As before, if 1 value is specified, it is applied to all 4 sides. If 2 values are specified, the top and bottom are set to the first, and the left and right are set to the second. If 3 values are specified, the top is set to the first value, the sides are set to the second value, and the bottom is set to the third value. And if 4 values are specified, they are set to the top, right, bottom, and left, respectively. Note, 2 blocks adjacent to each other vertically generally have their margins combined into a single margin, which is the larger of the 2 margin values. This is called margin collapse. Details of the exceptions to this rule are explained in the standard, but I just thought you ought to know of this possibility. Wow, that's a lot of detailed information, and hard to digest at once, probably. Here's some rules of thumb I use that might help you clear your mind. First, minimize using any of these properties. The defaults are often fine. When you do code them, specify values this way. For position properties, top, left, bottom, right, use percentages. For width properties, width, min width, max width, use percentages. For height properties, height, min height, max height, do not code at all until we get to media elements. For border properties, use the shorthand so that all edges have the same properties. For border width, use pixels. So, for example, border 3 pixels ridge blue. For margin properties, use pixels for small numbers, percentage for large amounts. And for padding properties, use pixels. For the rest of this video, we build examples to demonstrate how you might apply all this information. Example 1 will be using div to build the 4-box page we set as a goal. Example 2 will build the same page without using div. And example 3 will demonstrate the impact of various values of the position property. So, we're off. Example 1, using div to build the 4-box page. Recall, our goal is to have our page look like this, and more specifically, maybe this. The idea behind using div for the heavy lifting is to use div elements to generate blocks within which we code our content elements, which generate boxes within the blocks. In the head section, I coded a title and a meta charset equals UTF-8, and then this style element. For notes, I put a border in all of the style rules except title box. Having a set of borders of different colors helps you see where the box boundaries are drawn. I usually remove the borders when I'm done. The default padding and margin values vary for each browser, and users can often change them. I found out that my Firefox browser had a margin I didn't want, so I forced it to 0 in the body style rules. For the div style rule, I specified border style and width. These will apply for all div elements, so I just need to specify a color using a class attribute. Notice this will impact a div element with class equals title box. That will generate a block with a border using the default color, which is black. So even though I don't specify a border for title box, it will still have one because it is used for a div element. I also like using a width of 3 pixels so it's easily visible. So title box will represent my top box, and a paragraph with class equals footer represents my bottom box. Note the background here. That's one way to say background color gray. I chose a whimsical font for the title box. Might not be available on all browsers, but I couldn't resist. I'm anticipating that div with a class of main container will include both the left and right columns of the main box. Next, in the body, I code this. Note, after each end div tag, I add a comment indicating which div tag this is the end for. This helps a lot when you nest div elements deeply. It helps to keep your start and end tags paired, preventing element overlap. Also, notice ampersand copy semicolon at the start of the footer paragraph. This is another of those character entity references. This one ends up displaying as a copyright symbol, useful since few keyboards have it. This much displays this way. Okay, it's a start. Notice how the borders show up. This sets up the title box and the copyright box. Next, I set up classes for the left and right columns, sidebar and main body respectively. In the style element, I added 2 new rules, left column and right column. Notice in both entries I put margins of 5 pixels all the way around. I coded this way in anticipation of changing the right margin for the right column. Also, note I coded a padding entry for the right column class. Finally, just to point out, I could have coded the border property for left column as border : fuchsia or border - color fuchsia. Then, in the body, I coded this, which defines a div element for left column containing 2 paragraph elements and a div element for right column that contains an H1 element. And this displays as not what I'm after. The problem here is that browsers create boxes as wide as their container by default. I need to set both the left column box and the right column box to be narrower. And here's what I came up with. So here I set left column to have a width of 30% of the available space. Then I also had to have right column be spaced to the right, which I did by setting margin left to 33%. This is past the left column's 30%, leaving a little room for space just for visual clarity. The body I left unchanged, and the result was this. Yikes! Why isn't the rightmost column next to the left column? The answer is I need to give the left column the float option, so subsequent boxes are able, at least theoretically, to display next to the top of the left column box. So now, style for left column has the float left property. And again, without changing the body, I see this. Excellent. Now I notice that course list is not centered, so I add a new style element for centering. And in the body, I add some of the detail text and set the H1 class to reference the center rule. Notice on the detail lines, I inserted 3 non-breaking space character entity references, ampersand NBSP semicolon, before the text. This is to cause these lines to be indented. Sneak peek, later we'll replace these with LI, list elements, and the need goes away. And the result is this. Now we're down to just tweaking details. Personally, I'd like to see the text indented a little, so I added a new class, lister, padding left 5 pixels, margin left 5 pixels, and then added class equals lister to the 3 detail paragraphs. And the result, you can see the indentation. Okay, now I'm ready to take the training wheels off. That is, I remove the border properties from all style rules and get this. Then you can dress it up as you like. Maybe something like this. And you should be able to figure out how to do the above if you thought it was a better style for your needs. And eventually, all those entries in the lists will be made into links, A elements, to aid site navigation. Example 2, the no div approach. So now I got to wondering about how to accomplish this without the use of div. I went back to the version of this page where the borders were still intact so I could see the way the layout was developing. In the head element, go to the style element and delete the div style rules. In the body element, delete the div and endiv for class equals main container and class equals left column and right column. Then convert the div element for title box to be a paragraph, a P element. And now, because the detail paragraphs were part of div before, we need to add the style here for the left column in both of these paragraphs. And then for this paragraph also, but this one was right column. Now, because these have two values separated by a space, we need to put quotes around the whole thing. Now we'll do a save and refresh our page. And the result is this strange conglomeration. What's happening here is that the two paragraphs under the left column are now not under the grouping of a div. And since there's room for the second box to float next to the first, it will be put there. And there's even some room for the right column box to at least start there. We need to tell the browser that the left column boxes should be stacked on the left. And the solution is to add clear left to the left column style rule. So we'll save and go refresh. And taking off the borders again is simple, and we're done. So the 4-box page with no div elements. Example 3, using the position property. Sometimes you want to position an element at a specific point on a page. For example, on long web pages, you might see a small block labeled top or to top of page, or just an upward pointing caret. This is set up as a link to an ID near the top of the page. So, how to keep this block with the pointer visible, even as the user scrolls down the page? Easy. We position it. There are 4 options for position: static, relative, absolute, and fixed. Static is the default, what we've been using all along. In the examples that follow, we examine the other options. We start with our markup page from the lab for the first video session in this lesson. It's not real long, but it's long enough to demonstrate our top of page indicator concept. First, in the style element in the head, I added this style rule. Top. Position is relative. Top 90%, which means any element with this class should be 90% down from the top of the page. Borders we've seen before, and margin left 90%, which means it should be 90% over to the right, and then padding for 5 pixels. Then in the body, first of all, in the first paragraph, I added this ID so we can have an href to it later on. And then down at the bottom, you see I added this paragraph, class equals top, so that sets those properties, and pointing back to that page top ID that I built earlier. And if we see over here what it looks like when I scroll down, there's my top indicator, and if I click on it, it gets me back to the top of the page. Now, I did this with a couple of other variations, and one is I simply added some more text down here, so I had more than just the word top, but I had other text. And this was based on some experience I've had. When you scroll down, you can have lots of text over here, and notice it sometimes goes outside your boundary. And that'll play a deeper role in some of the other examples. In this example, I left everything the same except I set position to be absolute. And over here, where we run the code, notice down in the lower right, because it's absolute, it stays in the same place. In this case, it overlays text, so that might not be a great solution. Also, I thought I'd show you the same thing as if I had long text and see what happens there. Again, I'm past the boundaries, and it's just really not very good. There are times when absolute is exactly what you want, but obviously not in this case. And now we see what position fixed does. Again, everything else in the page is the same except for the value for the position parameter. And over here, you see, like we had with absolute, except now as I scroll up and down, it is not scroll at all. Then I had the same thing here with the long text, and again, because it doesn't scroll, you can't see it. Now, you can sometimes solve a little bit of a problem by making your viewport larger, but of course you have no control over what the user is going to do. So you want to think this through carefully, and you want to do a lot of testing to make sure that the way you end things up is useful. Well, I wanted to demonstrate a couple other examples of this kind of page layout and managing the way the pages scroll and so forth. This page here is from a Sister Cities program. I'm currently the chairman of the committee. And you'll notice here I have Scrollable. My box on the left-hand side, the sidebar, is longer than a screen width, but you can scroll up and down, no problems. Whereas here at the Global Travel Factory, another little business I run, I've got this fixed. So as I scroll up and down, then the site navigation stays visible. And again, as we saw earlier, that really depends on not having too much territory taken by this so that you don't lose it when you work with smaller screens. Well, we've had a rich ride in this session, covering style properties that affect page layout and seeing some techniques to help implement your ideas. But the most important part is planning. Work out on paper exactly what you want to see, then use the techniques discussed in this video to get what you're after. And yet, another key to success here is trial and error. For example, I earlier said my rules of thumb include never code height until we get to media elements. Yet, I coded a height property for the footer class, and I coded a margin property for the div rules right off the bat and never mentioned it. Both of these came to me as I experimented with different style rules and the resulting look on the screen. In the next lesson, we examine how to create style sheets so that you don't have to copy and paste your style elements into lots of web pages. See you there.